Okay, so just to continue a little bit from yesterday and move on, Be'ez Hashem, the Modeh Ani Melech brings down Parshas Noach, a very interesting Yesod, and he bases his words on Rashi. Rashi talk about the word Soihar, which obviously is talking about either a precious stone or a window, and the Rebbe Melech brings down that the Hebrew word for the ark is a teva, which can also, says the Modeh Ani Melech, mean a word, not only an ark, but also teva, a word. And therefore, says the Modeh Ani Melech, what the Torah is telling us, hinting to us almost, is that we should make our words into precious stones. And that's a very important idea, because the Mishnah Berurah actually brings this down by Sukkot Zimmer, which Mitzvah Hashem will get there, where he says that we should say the words of Sukkot Zimmer as if we're counting money. When you count money, you don't just randomly do it, sort of miss a few here and there. Every note makes a difference. And therefore, the words of Pesukei Zimmer and the words of Tefillah in general should be made into precious stones that we are machshiv, each and every one of them. The Chofetz Chaim, when the Mishnah Berurah Simon Kuf brings down, and he quotes the Taz, that we must organize our tefillahs before saying it. The Pri Megadim, the Heilige Baal HaTanya also says that of course anyone can say the words of the Siddur, but it's understanding the words is where that makes the difference between someone that's really davening with kavanah and not davening with kavanah. As we said yesterday, we have to have emunah, betocha, and trust in the idea and the power, the koyach of our tefillah, and that's what we're doing over here, Rabbi Say. So we're going to start today, b'siyata d'shmaya, with the very first tefillah that a yid should utter when he wakes up in the morning, and that is the tefillah of Modeh Ani. Yeah. The tefillah of Modeh Ani is the very first tefillah that we say in the morning. Let's just say like this: Modeh Ani lefanecha. We'll speak a little bit about the words. Modeh Ani, I give thanks in front of the Rabbeinu Shalom Melech Chai v'Kayam shechazarta bi nishmasi b'chemla rabba munasecha. We know, as the Mesorah tells us, our neshama goes up to the Rabbeinu Shalom as a bikoden to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and it's returned to us in the morning. Rabba munasecha, we have tremendous emunah and trust in the Rabbeinu Shalom that he will be returning it. Now, these are the very first words that a yid utters in the morning. In fact, the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Samach Amud Beis, says that really the very first tefillah that a yid should say is Elokai Neshama. However, we actually start with Modeh Ani, which is interesting because Modeh Ani was composed after Elokai Neshama. But we do that simply because Modeh Ani has no Shem Hashem. And the very first thing, before we've even washed Negel Vasa and removed the Ruach Ra from our hands, we are giving thanks to the Rabbeinu Shalom and understanding where our lives come from. Now, we have to also understand that our relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom should not only be a relationship between as a child and a parent, but also be as an infant to a parent. A child, depending on the age, can sometimes manage some things on his own. An infant, a baby, can manage nothing on his own. He's totally dependent on his parents. And therefore, what we want to do, and we want to acknowledge at the moment we open up our eyes and we realize that we are alive and we can see and we can breathe and we can move and do all the amazing things that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us, which we will talk about more in Birchas HaShachar, we have to realize that we are totally dependent on the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, Rabba Emunah Secha. Right? The very first thing we do is we declare our independence and realize that we are also dependent fully on the Rabbeinu Shalom. They did a study of people that wake up in different ways. Now, there are two different ways that they did a study on that they found that people wake up. Some people wake up with an alarm clock that has a buzz, that has a ring, that has a tone, whatever it may be. Some people wake up to the news. In other words, the news immediately switch on, and that's what they listen to. They made a study that the people that wake up with the news are more depressed throughout their day than the people that wake up with the alarm clock. What's the difference? The answer is very simple. News is generally depressing, right? Because no news is good news. Every news that they try to find and busy with is generally bad news, depressing news, not geschmack news. The very first thing you hear in the morning sets the tone for the rest of the day. So if you hear a happy tune, for example, that can make you happy. Whereas if you hear news, which is depressing, that will make you depressed. Therefore, it makes so much sense that the very first thing we do in the morning when we wake up is we say, Modeh Ani lefanecha Melech Chai v'Kayam. Rabbeinu Shalom, you are the Melech Chai v'Kayam, or being moided to you, that our lives are fully entrusted in you. Rav Aaron Leib Steinman in his Sefer, beautiful Sefer on Tefillah, and Rav Shimshon Pinkus on his beautiful Sefer and Tefillah ask basically the same question. And they ask, why is the very first word Modeh? Why don't we say Ani Modeh? Like, for example, by benching, we say Anachnu Moidim Loch. We are Modeh to you. Why don't we should say Ani Modeh, right? What's the Modeh Ani? So they basically both answer the same idea, that we don't want the very first word that comes out of our mouth in Tefillah to the Rabbeinu Shalom to start with Ani, me. Because everything we realize has to come from the Rabbeinu Shalom. Rav Shimshon Pinkus takes it actually a step further, and he says that within Modeh Ani actually contains everything that follows in davening. That means, from Modeh Ani till Aleinu L'Shabeach, everything's included in Modeh Ani. And therefore it's important to recognize and realize that we're starting the day being Modeh, our lives, our neshama, everything we have comes from the Rabbeinu Shalom, and through that we can get to Aleinu L'Shabeach. And he brings an example, and we'll end with this. He says that if you want to build a house, so you can imagine for a moment you want to build yourself a nice mansion, a nice house. You have these ideas in your head. Wow, I want it to look so high, so many windows, so many entrances, the color. You got like a kind of picture in your mind. And then you go to a contractor, and then you go to a designer, you start designing things, you go to the zoning issues, you go to the planning, the permissions, the sketching, eventually the pipes, the electricity, and eventually you start building. It takes years and years, and eventually the house is built. How did it all start? With a picture of the house in the beginning, and then you went through the details. Says Rav Shimshon Pinkus, we start the day with the picture. Modeh Ani Lefanecha means we're saying to the Rabbeinu Shalom, Melech Chai V'Kayim, Rabba Emunasecha, we totally trust in you. Our lives are dependent on you. We only woke up because of you. Our neshama really belongs to you, and it's given to you through the night, and we got it back now. Memela, we're going to start our day, and now we're going to go to the details of Tefillah. But it all begins with Modeh Ani. Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow we shall continue with more.